So, why do the millennials have this mentality? Okay? They have this mentality of instant gratification. First of all, who are the millennials that I'm talking about? Who are the millennial generations? Who is the millennial generation? So the millennial generation could be defined as Generation Y, in between X and Z. I'm a Generation Xer. I come from Generation X, born between the years 1965 and 1980. I was born in 1974, right in the middle of Gen X. Okay? You know, and Gen Xers are more like focused on sort of a vocation, you know? They're not like drifters from one project or career to another, or, you know, they're generally like identify with like doing a vocation of some type, a task that they are very good at. Gen Y is more, you know, float from job to job or work from company to company, mostly because there isn't a lot of job security anymore. But it's like, you know, they don't really have that like sort of vocational idea about what they want to do in life. So they're more drifters. They're also highly focused on self, service to self mentality. Not all of them. Again, these are generalities, not blanket statements in this case. Again, some blanket statements are true and sometimes I'll make them. In this case, I'm making generalities, generalized statements that are largely true, but not always. Okay? Generation Y is born between the years 1981 and 1996. Some people will place that slightly higher. I've heard, you know, 84 to 97 to 98. It's in that region, okay? You know, early 80s to mid 90s to even late 90s, okay? And they're highly focused on it's like these are the people I was talking about last week that think the personal computer is over with. We don't need high-end desktops or laptops. We could just use tablets and smartphones, okay? They're always in their phone. They're always in social media, obsessed with social media. This generation is obsessed with social media. Status on social media is like their life's goal, okay? And thinking that I can do everything on my cell phone. I can do everything on my tablet. Well, actually, no, you can't. And that was a deliberate effort on the part of the social engineers to get you off of a truly creative platform like a powerful personal desktop computer. Okay? Or a powerful laptop computer. All right? That's who we're talking about here. Okay? So this has been also called the me generation. And there we have it again. Mini-me Satanism, me, gimme, instant gratification. You know, my generation has some of that, but not to the extent that the next generation does. Now, Generation Z, I'm hearing good things about, that are seeing all the bullshit of Gen Y, of the millennials, and going, good God, how did we let it get this bad? And they're stepping up and doing something about it already, as young as they are. You know, they're realizing how totally fucked their parents are. You know, how fucked up in the head that they are. And realizing how fucked they're making the world. And they're basically saying, no, we got to do something about this. Some of them, not all of them, but, you know, a portion of them are waking up just by the nature of how mentally screwed up their parents' generation is. Okay? And guess what? I'll blame it right on my generation. My generation made Gen Y. Gen X produced Gen Y. Okay? We produced the millennials. My generation produced the millennial generations because largely my generation was so screwed up from the baby boomer generation that created us that we passed the nonsense right down to the children that my generation produced and created the millennials. It seems like the cycle is being interrupted a little bit. I'm not going to use the word completely broken, but it's not progressing in a cyclical pattern as it did over the last 3 generations. Something's going on with Gen Z that isn't the way that the social engineers are really planning for it. Now, that being said, let's see how it plays out. I'm not prophesying anything there, okay? I'm saying that I think they have a little bit better of a chance, the Gen Z, younger generation does, than the millennials, because the millennials have, when I mean the mind control worked perfectly upon them. When I mean it worked perfectly, I mean it went flawlessly. The machine had not one kink in it during the formational years of Gen Y at all. The social engineers, I have to give them a round of applause. I mean, you guys, brilliant work, okay? They're no joke. These people are not a joke. The social engineers who programmed Generation Y with their belief systems did a flawless job, I have to say, okay? A flawless job. Because I have never seen in my life a more brainwashed generation, ever, okay? And thank God your children aren't listening to your bullshit. Thank God. Okay? That's all I have to say. You know? Thank God your children are infinitely smarter than the dunces that you are. Most of them. I'm not talking to every single person in that generation, because there are some that are legitimately awake. Okay? But I'm talking to the vast majority as a whole, as a group. Okay? You're not going to get done to your children the mind fuck job that the previous generation unfortunately allowed to happen to you. It's not going to happen with your children. Okay? There's too much information, too much data, and they're just a little bit more streetwise than you are. Okay? And they're not buying the lies that you bought from the mainstream media. Because let me tell you something, folks. This generation, they'll portray them in the media as, oh, they're always on their cell phone. They are addicted to mainstream media. Addicted. Okay? And you want to say, no, they don't watch as much television. They watch just as much television, and they watch TV in other forms. Just because they're not watching TV on a television doesn't mean that they're not paying attention to the mainstream media on other devices. Okay? Just because they absorb the same bullshit on a different device doesn't mean they're not taking the same bullshit into their minds. Okay? So this is who Generation Y is, the millennial generation. Okay? And this is who I'm talking about, that has this attitude of, I need it on my terms. I'm not interested in your daily work or what you have to go through, or your routine, your schedule, your hardships. It's me. Is this going to be better for me? Well, then do it, even if it's harder for you. Okay? That's their whole mentality. Their mentality is, I care about only me. It's a satanic mindset. Okay? Satanism was very much propagandized to this generation of individuals. And they bought into it hardcore. What else was very much propagandized to these individuals was socialism. Okay? Socialism was the long march through the cultural institutions, the Gramsci plan coming out of the Frankfurt School of Germany, okay, was brought into the mindset of the millennial generation in a hardcore form, more so than any other generation on earth. And that was done through the university systems of North America, specifically the United States, and of all the European countries. The university system is where the communists and socialists decided to spread their tentacles through. Okay? And that's where they decided that they were going to actually concretize and conduct the long march through the institutions, the plan of Antonio Gramsci, the Italian communist. Okay? Read about him, read about the Frankfurt School, which was, said that conquering a nation militaristically with communism and then bringing it to the rest of the world is not the way to do it. That you would have to extend your tentacles to the far corners of the earth and then conquer the world culturally. Conquer each nation culturally, weaken its people, weaken the sexes, divide people along all kinds of boundaries, which we talked about on former shows about division, and then conquer them through cultural means. And that was called the Long March through the cultural institutions. And it has worked flawlessly. And it has worked most flawlessly on Generation Y, the millennial generation. They bought into that whole plan of divide and rule, divide and conquer, bringing in socialism and eventually communism through cultural mechanisms. Okay? That is the mindset that largely their parents pushed them into, that came out of the socialist schools of thought of the 1960s and 70s, okay, that invaded this country through Soviet Russia and other places in Europe.